Hey everyone, I'm Elle from Elscapades, and for the longest time, my life pretty much revolved around going to school, particularly taking art classes. So, for my amusement and now your entertainment, I decided to see how I can summarize my art classes in 1 minute or less, years after I finished. This ranges from actual important advice, surprises, regrets, and interactions that left an impression. For the wrong reasons. First up is drawing fundamentals. Basic shapes look easy and feel almost, well, too basic to draw, but they really are a good solid foundation, and you should take it seriously. Sure, you can get away with not building on this skill, but honestly, it will save you a lot of time and effort in the long run. It's called drawing fundamentals for a reason. I can't even count the number of times where something felt almost too difficult to start to draw until I break them down into their basic shapes. Next up is 2D design. I think non artists and even some artists would be surprised by how much effort it actually takes to make something look really simple and yet still convey the message it needs to. Anyone with enough time and dedication can make an artwork where every inch of the paper is covered. But to take an image down to the basics but still get your message across, now that takes skill. Next up is 3D art. Pop-ups on books are both simpler and harder than you'd think they are. Also, I'm really not good with 3D anything. I can't seem to make clay or paper mache look the way I want it to. And yes, I know this takes practice, but I also realize it's not quite my cup of tea, but it is a very good skill and foundation to have. Figure drawings. Some non-artists probably have their own ideas about how this class is like, especially given the nudity involved. Some might even think that there's some sexual thoughts or even tension involved. There really isn't. The strongest emotion I felt in that class was irrational rage at the models who just could not stay still. Look, I understand there's a lot of difficulty involved, but at the end of the day, the model is still going to get paid for their time, even if they didn't do well, while my grade suffers. I mean, yes, eventually we just fill in the gaps as best as we can, even if the model is moved, but at the same time, it is very frustrating to look at the model, look at your canvas, and look back at the model, and she is moved. Also, depending on where you stand and how the model is posed, be ready for a lot of uncanny valley vibes. Next up is rendering. Nothing is too big or complicated to draw that you can't break it down into basic shapes. If something looks too intimidating, break it down into cones, cubes, cylinders, spheres, and pyramids. Also, 3-point perspective is a pain, but it looks damn impressive. I had to tape the paper up on the wall, and I had to draw the vanishing points on the wall, but I managed. Next up is watercolor. I can't believe that I've been doing watercolor for years before I learned how to stretch the paper. It's a whole process which involves soaking the entire paper, and somehow it doesn't rip. I just assume that you use watercolor boards for big pieces that you don't want to warp, and for the smaller stuff, you just kind of suffer? Apparently not. Digital art. I already had a pretty decent idea on how Photoshop worked, and I did not expect how much of a leg up that would be. I was also really lucky that the professor I ended up with spent a lot more time over Illustrator than Photoshop. On the other hand, I am still filled with a little bit of rage that certain effects and windows are located very differently or very far between different programs in the Adobe suite. Digital photography. In hindsight, I probably should have taken more advantage of the fact that I could rent a camera from the art lab while I was enrolled in this class. Apparently, I also probably would have been better off just self-studying photography in general, because most of the class content in the actual class, I probably could have just learned from home in my pajamas. Instead, I had to put on pants like an adult. Digital publishing. Knowing how Adobe InDesign works makes it so tempting to just make your own book. Also, I still absolutely hate group work, and this only solidified my desire to one, work from home, and two, call the shots. Going in, I just wanted to get in and get out of the class with as little fuss as possible. That did not work out. I ended up having to fix and edit a big group project, and I don't even remember why I had to be the one to do that. Either way, it sucked because I was already busy taking care of wedding preparations, not to mention my actual wedding itself. Typography. Have a maximum of 2 fonts for each piece or series. Also, now I'm second guessing if I meant font or typeface. Pretty sure I meant font. But seriously, you don't need more than 2. If your work looks too boring, what you actually need is a variation in line weight or in size. I did actually learn a lot more in this class, but that was the most important thing that I could think of that I learned and for me to share. Next up is web design. I thought I'm not the type to hold grudges, but apparently I am. Or this is an exception. Let me put it like this. The best advice I got from that professor when I asked how to code something was just Google it. And that's all I'll say on it. Otherwise, this would go on for longer than a minute. Motion graphics. I might have enjoyed the class more if we got to work on personal stuff instead of trying to recreate samples for about 80% of the class. The reality of the class just ended up being a little bit more boring than I expected it to be going in. Let me just put it like this. When I had a choice between regular work for this class or extra credit for another class that I already had an A in, I chose to do the extra credit because that extra credit was about 10 times more challenging and 100 times more rewarding, especially in terms of experience. Granted, it's biting me in the butt now because if I want to make motion graphics or other special effects for my YouTube channel, then I'm gonna have to learn it on my own. Next up is illustration 1. Technically, I got an A, but I wasn't very proud of the work I did, and I wish I could have done better. I can't even remember what they are now, but I think I had some personal stuff going on around the time that I had this class. My work definitely met the project requirements, but I just didn't feel a personal connection or pride in my own work. This was the first time in a while that I felt apathetic about my work. Illustration 2. I also wasn't as satisfied with my work in this class, but for different reasons. For illustration level 2, we had to pick our own project, set our own deadlines, and essentially we were self-managing for the whole semester. I think I bit off more than I can chew with a semester-long project that I picked for myself. Some of the work I did was fine, but I think I spread myself too thin, trying to do everything at once instead of focusing on one piece at a time. Next up is graphic design. Apparently, some people think it's fine to use 12 to 14 point script on a cover letter and a resume. They themselves could not read what they wrote after they printed it out, but they still thought it was okay to submit to a hypothetical employer. Spoiler alert, it is not okay. Please don't do this. Honestly, I did learn a lot from this class and I gained a lot of valuable experience, but now all I could think of is that sometimes all I could think of is that I hate people. This was the class that made me lose hope in people. Advertising design 1. It is a lot harder than it looks to summarize a product in 3 words or less. 2 is probably even better. I used to think that the whole got milk thing was kind of stupid, but at the same time, you will never forget that thing, even after only hearing it a couple times. I mean, look at me. I didn't even grow up here and I know about it. Look, it's great if your ad is aesthetically pleasing, clever, or just good. But you know what? Nothing beats being memorable. Some memorable ads are even good, but most of them probably aren't. Sometimes all they've got going is that you can't get them out of your head, and that's all it takes. Next up is advertising design 2. This one wasn't a self-managed semester. We did still get project prompts, but they were different from the level 1 class. My main challenge during this class was how to get my target demographic to buy a product when they have zero interest and zero money. We did this mock campaign where we were trying to sell electric toothbrushes or floss to college students. I know it was just a class exercise, but to this day, it bothers me if I had the right answer to that or not. There you have it. All the art classes I took in the US in a nutshell. Or at least, I'm pretty sure that's all of them. Looking back on it, I think it's mostly anecdotes during class instead of technical lessons from that class. Not sure if that says something specifically about me or the human brain in general. Either way, today is not the day I get into that. What about you? What do you remember from your college classes, and are they technical skills or something else? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time. Bye! This was the first time around school, specifically fears only solidified this semester, and